Okay, so here's the little something different. It's just something that occurred to me as I was working on it this afternoon. It's another project of mine, actually. It's a novel that I am now putting the very finishing touches on, which I hope to be releasing in the next several months, and that I've been working on roughly for like 6, 7 years, I think, all told. So on that subject, more or less, I was thinking just to introduce this other project, this novel that I've been working on. Hell, I did that again. My toes feel a need to grip things, and they grip the tripod that my camera's on. I thought I would do just a short reading of the book. I describe it anyway as a queer anti-fascist road novel, and the main character is Davina, or Davy Jones of Cardiff, who, amongst other things, is sort of a semi-professional pub fighter, but ends up getting mixed up in all sorts of things, and it's all quite absurdist. Yeah, and a lot of it was a lot more dystopian and satirical a few years ago when I wrote it, before a lot of these things just literally happened. Yeah, but so I'm just going to read a little excerpt from the book. Give a taste of it. This is the bit that I was just polishing today. That evening, on the way to the pub, Jones continued thinking about all she'd seen and heard at the Urquhart house. On her way there, she'd noticed that the weather was finally entering the mid-April tolerability she found herself longing for 8 months out of the year. She didn't even need a coat for the 15-minute walk from her flat to the Capel Celyn, her boozer of choice when she had things on her mind. The Capel Celyn was a model of managed decline. Over the decade and more that she'd frequented it, it had gone from a real ale pub with a thoughtful draft list and the cleanest pipes in Cardiff, to a brains pub with a few decent beers and ciders still available, to a brains flagship pub, meaning that the draft list contained only brains beer and things calculated to make brains beer look good by comparison. With each new manager, the Capel Celyn had been downgraded a bit further. One manager some years prior had inexplicably closed off half the seating and shut down the Skittle Alley, where multiple leagues had played since time immemorial. There had never been any problems filling seats at the 150-year-old pub. Now the place tended towards overcrowding. His successor had seen the handmade Edwardian bar lovingly polished for generations, and decided the only thing for it was to take it out and replace it with the latest in ugly formaker shit. Rumour had it that the bar was now in that manager's home. As the ambience and offerings were steadily downgraded, the prices were becoming increasingly aspirational. Jones remembered a time, not long ago, when the Celyn had had delicious Devon scrumpy for £1.50 a pint. These days, they had Strongbow, and that unlovely urine substitute went for £3.75. It was only a matter of time, Jones mused, before the Capel Celyn would go the way of so many others and be transformed into yet another shitball sports bar, a boring yet expensive bar and grill, or perhaps another block of empty flats. A sign on the front door read, "Please respect the ongoing gentrification process and leave quietly." "Not bloody likely," Jones muttered, and walked in. As she entered, she heard a chorus of "Ya right, Davy," from several of the tenacious regulars at their usual table by the front window. She didn't recognise the bar staff. For the past few years, staff here had turned over like crepes. "You know," Jones heard a familiar voice say from behind her, addressing everyone and no one. It was Shonk. He had a deep, rich voice that carried unless he had intervened to limit its reach. 20-odd years in Wales had done nothing to dilute what he liked to call his rough-as-guts Queensland accent. I like this town, you know. Love it. Bloody great people in Cardiff, I mean that. He noticed Jones, who had turned around to see the show, and grinned in her general direction. Heaps of fucking residual beauty in this city. That's why I've stayed here all these years. The Centaurian Aussie was beginning to attract an audience. One by one, conversations paused and people turned his way to see what this was about. Off in a corner, Jones noticed a couple she'd not seen before. Well-dressed and decidedly out of place, looking about nervously as if they expected a fight. Shonk, however, was in his element. I say all that just so you'll understand where I'm coming from when I say, what the fuck is wrong with this place? Seriously, I don't get it. Why is it that every time this city sees a good pub, some nice little place, with a well-maintained bloody Victorian or Edwardian interior, you know, and a draft list made up of things people actually fucking want to drink, not bloody Brain, Strongbow, Carling and Bud Light, the alcoholic equivalent of the bloody Labour Party conference, nice fireplace with a fat dog lying in front of it. You know this sort of place. Why is it whenever this city finds a lovely place like that, it says, ooh, ooh, kill it before it gets away? Why? I really don't get it. Isn't it fucking embarrassing? I mean, your mates come in from out of town. So, where'd you go for a drink in the Welsh capital then? Well, mate, you're in for a real treat, see? 'Cause if we hurry, we can just make the next train to Temple Meads. The regulars laughed openly. The newcomers with restraint, as if unsure whether they were meant to hear what they just heard. The well-dressed couple, meanwhile, had quietly made it about halfway to the front door. Hugging the wall like British soldiers in Basra across Maglen or some other place British soldiers insisted on going, despite nobody wanting them there. At least they were giving the place a long overdue dusting. The show being over, she took out a fiver and sat down at the bar. Shonk was on form tonight. This was just what Jones needed. End of excerpt. So that's a brief sampling of the thing that I'm working on and have been on and off since like 2015, 2014, something like that. And someday soon, it will actually be released in book form. Yeah, I mean, it's a real ride. I mean, I didn't even know where the hell I was going with it half the time. It was just really, uh, basically, I just sort of let these fascinating and often very weird characters sort of just take me wherever they were going, and it ended up being an absolute roller coaster that is roughly 300 pages in length, and that I'm now just sort of ironing out the little bits of, making sure that I've not completely screwed up continuity someplace.